Welcome back. You're watching SA Today with me, Unati Pagyasho. Let's continue here now. The increasing rate of hunger and poverty in both rural and urban areas of the Eastern Cape is alarming. In the past 15 months, 14 children below the ages of 5 starved to death in the Nelson Mandela Bay. There was also confirmation of 216 new cases of severe acute malnutrition in this metro, while 16,000 families were left without any food and aid. The provincial health department held a food security campaign at Ngqeleni, one of the impoverished areas in the Eastern Cape. Ngqeleni filed this report for us.
Queuing up for food. However, it is only enough for a few days. Hunger and poverty remain major challenges for many communities in the Eastern Cape, resulting in the deaths of many children and leaving the elderly depressed. Government has called on communities to till the land and to fight poverty in the rural areas.
It's an awareness to say to our people, go back to the basics. Use your small vegetable gardens so that you can produce food that is well nutritious to give your kids. And even tell them what they do when they see signs of malnourishment in terms of the kids. They refer them to our clinics, how they use our tapes to see if the child is malnourished.
Hunger and poverty are harsh realities that impoverished communities face every day.
I have
no children, I have no grant. I'm dependent on handouts from the community. I have nothing. Poverty is extremely high here. We do not have money. We are only using child grant to feed ourselves, and it is very bad. We have no other source of income. We are not working. We are just victims of poverty.
Non-governmental organizations work tirelessly to detect victims of hunger among the impoverished communities.
When you get in some of the houses, you find that there is a granny, and then the granny is staying with about 9 children. And then when we ask questions, you find that the mother is sick. That is one of the examples that we encountered the other day. Or either the parents, the mothers of the children, they are not even around. They are somewhere in the city because they left looking for jobs. And the other challenge that you find is that those children don't even have the government grant.
Government wants the public and private sector to join hands in the fight against poverty.
We are coming here to say to the people, the issue of health is not the absence of diseases. It's how you take good care of yourself from a very young age, because kids are dying, in particular the younger than 5 years, are dying because of malnutrition. So it's an issue that we need partners. Hence we invited even the traditional leaders, the municipalities, both local and district, because this thing is not a thing of a Department of Health or a thing of the Department of Agriculture. It's about all of us putting hands together.
Hunger has resulted in many people scavenging from landfills, while some children also spend most of their time in the streets looking for food. SABC News in Ngqeleni.
All right, now let's discuss this. We're now joined via Zoom by Advocate Paul Hoffman. He's the Director of Accountability. Now, Advocate Hoffman, thank you so much for your time. Of course, this is very disturbing. You know, surely the stats that we've just seen now in the Eastern Cape reveal that South Africa does indeed have a hunger problem. How big a health crisis is this posing for the country?
Good afternoon, Onati, and good afternoon to your viewers as well. Thank you for the opportunity. This is indeed a seriously concerning problem, and it's not only in the Eastern Cape, it is throughout the country that small children are either malnourished or starving to death. And what one needs to understand about that is that malnutrition is a phenomenon that stunts the development not only physically, but also mentally of the child that suffers from a lack of food. And that means that the child grows up in a situation in which it is unable to compete on equal footing with those of its contemporaries who have been properly nourished and properly educated during the course of their younger years. You know, I listened to the clip with tears in my eyes because the idea of treating the symptoms of malnutrition by encouraging people to plant their own vegetable gardens has severe limitations. The real problem in South Africa is that 1/3 of the food that is produced in this country ends up in edible condition on landfill sites. It is dumped because it is surplus to the needs of the market. And that needs to be addressed simply because the right to access to food for small children, children under the age of 18, is an unqualified right that is contained in the Bill of Rights, which is Chapter 2 of our Constitution. That Bill of Rights requires that the state respect, protect, promote, and fulfill the right of every child to access to adequate nutrition. And that can be done by creating a regulatory environment in which the 1/3 of food which is thrown away is in fact recycled in a way that it reaches the empty bellies of the hungry in our country. And remember, 55% of the people in South Africa live below the upper poverty datum line. So there's no shortage of those who could benefit from diverting the flow of food to the landfill or the tip and redirecting it to the people who are currently malnourished or suffering from hunger.
And you're right, this problem, of course, is bigger than just the Eastern Cape. In fact, in the Food and Agriculture Organization, they say 45% of the South African population experienced moderate or severe food insecurity between 2018 and 2020. But just also going back to the Eastern Cape, I mean, the South African Human Rights Commission reported that the studies and the stats indicate that many children in that province live in abject poverty and as a result, as you say, are malnourished. Do you think government has a clear plan then to deal with this crisis, particularly if we know some of the problem lies at landfills?
What we have said to the Human Rights Commission, which is why they had an inquiry in the Eastern Cape into it, is that this is a nationwide problem that needs to be addressed imaginatively by creating a regulatory environment in which it is simply illegal to throw good food away. If you do that, you are going to force the big supermarkets, the food chain, the producers of food, agribusiness, to come up with a solution that diverts the food that is currently being thrown away toward those who are malnourished or suffering from food insecurity or hunger. The Human Rights Commission has come to the party. They've had a commission of inquiry in the Eastern Cape, East London-based office of the Commission of Inquiry. We gave evidence at that commission. And from your intro, I rather gather that the Human Rights Commission may well have reported on the findings of that commission. But we, as complainant, we have not yet received word of what the Human Rights Commission has come up with. But we would hope that they will be exhorting government to create a system that eliminates the wastage of good food in South Africa. We don't need to suffer from hunger and poverty when 1/3 of the food that we produce is actually just being thrown away at the moment. It's just common sense.
Just today, the former President Thabo Mbeki was lamenting about, just the socio-economic conditions of this country. So how much of the adverse economic conditions that we are seeing now, and in particular what has happened recently in the country with, COVID-19, of course, that has affected everybody in the globe, have impacted in this problem that we are facing now?
Yes, I'm pleased to say that the farmers in South Africa did not allow COVID-19 to reduce their productivity. They've managed to continue to produce sufficient food to meet the needs of South Africans. The problem is that poor people do not currently have the opportunity or the wherewithal to be united with the surplus food that currently goes to waste because it is thrown away on a landfill when it could actually be consumed by the hungry and those suffering food insecurity in South Africa. So it is really simply a question of the state coming to the party, respecting and protecting the rights of the children of South Africa to have sufficient food so that they do not grow up malnourished, stunted physically and mentally, and unable to compete with their peers, by putting in place a system that diverts that food which goes to waste at the moment to the poor and the hungry.
We know we've talked about government interventions are crucial and necessary, but we've also seen civil society try and tackle this problem. So how much of, the coordinated effort is needed here, particularly when you see that most of these civil society groupings are funded by the private sector?
Yes, I'm afraid that the problem is bigger than the wherewithal of civil society organizations to address it. There are organizations such as Food Forward SA who work on diverting food that would otherwise be thrown away to get it to the hungry and to the poor. But it really requires a centralized, organized effort. And the responsibility for that effort is not the responsibility of the private sector or the civil society organizations who are addressing the problems of hunger. It is the task of the state, it is the business of the state to come up with a system that avoids the wastage of food and promotes the food arriving where it is needed most. And that is not happening at the moment. It requires a regulatory environment which it's not beyond the wit of man to devise. But the problem is that there is so much lack of capacity, so much corruption in the system that what to be done is not done. And you see politicians inviting people to grow their own lettuce and their own vegetables as a workaround solution, when in fact the correct solution is to ensure that no food goes to waste in South Africa while there are hungry people in South Africa. And there are lots of hungry people. It's more than half of the population that is at risk because they live below the poverty datum line. And some people estimate that there are 10 million people in South Africa, that's 1/6 of the population, who go to bed hungry at night. And that ought not to be happening in a country that is able to produce food of the quality and quantity that is in fact available in South Africa, and ought not to be finding its way through the food chain, the distribution system, into the landfills of the country. Our landfills have got plenty of other things to occupy them. They don't need to have good food thrown away in the landfills.
I absolutely agree with you, Advocate Hoffman, particularly because we know that this does affect the poorest of the poor. That's where we have to leave it, I'm afraid. Advocate Paul Hoffman, he's the Director of Accountability Now.